there's going to be times where he can't, like going straight to the runway is not going to work because they didn't say, hey, let's have a medical emergency so that our descent profile is perfect into triad. You know,
Right.
that's not going to happen. So a lot of the times these guys that are screaming out of the flight levels, they don't want to go to Metroplex. It's too busy. That's too much delay. They don't want to go to Duke. It's too far. You know, whatever it is, they want to come here, and they're willing to take some turns to get down to do it.
Ready.
This is Opposing Bases Air Traffic Talk. Your host, Romeo Hotel and Alpha Golf, have a combined 40 years of aviation experience as pilots and air traffic controllers. They answer your questions and share their opinions about flying and air traffic control. This show is not official guidance and should not be used as a replacement for your instructor, your pilot examiner, the endless books of regulations, your favorite comedian, your neighbor, your spouse, or your cat.
November 628 Charlie Delta Squawk 1200, frequency change approved. The audio will be available on Live ATC. Good day.
November 643 Juliet Mike, cleared visual approach, runway 23 left, connect tower.
November 3222 Yankee, area of heavy to extreme precipitation, 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock, 15 miles, 70 miles.
3047 Charlie, tried departure, radar contact, climb and maintain.
November 747 Sierra Lima, reduce speed to 180, you're overtaking traffic ahead on final.
Skyhawk 77 Tango, IFR cancellation received, squawk 3 frequency change approved.
Sierra 720 Foxtrot Alpha, flighting 190 vectors for the visual approach,
Skyhawk
runway
Sierra
23
Papa,
left.
cleared to enter triad class Charlie surface area from the east, maintain special.
Charlie Fox Golf Foxtrot Alpha, this is Triad approach, on guard. You are being intercepted. The border is still closed, say intentions.
Please welcome your favorite controllers, Alpha Golf and Romeo Hotel.
It's Monday, September 27th, 2021, episode 196. On today's show, we will talk about priority handling of medevac flights, an Eskimo named Chester, and more of your awesome questions and feedback. What's up, AG?
Hello everyone.
I've done something different with my setup in the last couple shows. It's providing a little bit of insight into your facial expressions. I have you perfectly placed on my screen now. I can read these and see you moving your head and laughing.
Okay.
So my goal is to make you laugh at some point, and I thought, you know what? It's going to be because of the Eskimo named Chester.
I'm assuming that is someone's timely feedback.
I cut you off. Say again.
I'm assuming that's someone's timely feedback.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
You and I flew in an airplane together this weekend.
We did.
We were unsuccessful in issuing a NOTAM in time. But
yes,
I think we made it through without killing anybody or having any major traffic snafus.
Right. Just the only casualty was my back.
So that was the cause of this?
Well, not really, but it definitely did not help. I shouldn't have gone. I shouldn't have gone, really. It was not what I needed. But I did have a good time. We did get some great photos. I'm really happy with that. Seeing that show is amazing. I never get tired of it. But yeah, it did a number on me.
Your photos are amazing. The show was amazing. The weather was perfect. The flight out was smooth. Flight back was smooth. The only problem we had was our direction of flight.
Yeah, well, at the time, direction of flight at the wrong time of day.
Yes.
Only a couple amateurs would be into the sun both ways.
Right. So I held up a checklist to block the sun on the way out.
Right.
On the way back, I was maybe a little bit north of course, just to keep the airplane aimed slightly to the right. So there was
slightly uncoordinated.
a window beam in the way. Yeah. But it was fun.
Yeah.
You were a great radio and navigation guy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see. What else? You're flying this week, too.
In theory.
In theory.
Yes.
When does this theory begin? Wednesday?
Yeah, I'm supposed to fly Wednesday for 5 days, Wednesday through Sunday. We'll see how my back holds out, and we'll see how funding holds out.
I was going to say, that means there's no money for hotels, so you got to come home every day?
Yes.
Right. And there's probably no money for the airplanes. It's that tricky part of the year, the end of the fiscal year.
It is tricky, yes.
I think you could go on and on about that.
Oh, yeah, don't get me started.
I won't. Anyway, thanks for coming with me and being a great addition to the flight deck and taking great pictures. It was fun. We have to share some of those.
Fun. It was my pleasure.
I put some of them up on my personal Instagram this morning, just a couple of my favorites, but we should share some more with patrons later on.
All right.
I have to get your approval, though, since they're copyrighted, and your lawyers get mad when I just post them without your permission.
Right.
I gave you credit, though. Does that make it okay?
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. It depends on how much money you're making off of your Instagram.
I will funnel the millions towards you. I will take no dollars.
Okay.
All right, let's begin.
Ready.
Since OB195, we have a few new patrons in the show listener tier: Foxtrot Whiskey, Tango Kilo, and Tango Victor. And new in the show supporter tier: Sierra Alpha, Papa Mike, and Kilo Romeo. Welcome to Patreon, where our patrons get exclusive access to our video live stream every time we record. Like right now, they're in the chat room, pre and post show. We have a lot of fun. Thank you guys for your support. If you'd like to learn more about supporting the show, check out patreon.com/opposingbases. And if you haven't done so already, hit subscribe or follow. It's a fancy little button on your podcast player, so our shows are downloaded and waiting for you each week. And if you haven't done so already, leave us a review and a 5-star rating. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Terrain. Pull up.
Just announcements today. Announcements time.
No reviews.
I'm saving a couple of those. One of them, I think I'm going to save for 200. The one that we were laughing at the other day.
Oh, yeah.
It's very, very funny.
Yes.
I think it'll do well on our show.
Good.
in the live 200 episode. So, which ones do you want? Oh, before I even go, I didn't put this in here. We did finally post a link to the fly-in on our website. It's a tab at the top. Check it out, opposingbases.com. You can check out the 200th episode fly-in link with all the information you need if you are flying in or driving, times, food option, things going on at the airport. So check it out.
Cool.
You want number one?
Sure. You can also check out a link in the show notes that might shed some light on the unofficial helicopter theme song, Fortunate Son.
That was the article I sent you last week.
Yes, I did read that. Yeah, I just don't know how much I can agree with that. I mean, I definitely am a helicopter guy, but
What's part of it that you don't like or agree with?
well, I understand. I mean, you can't disagree with facts that it has been used extensively, in these types of scenes, and it definitely has been pasted onto this, sort of Vietnam era helicopter feeling, which is carried through, even till now. But the song is definitely catchy. It's a good sounding song, but if you read the lyrics of that song, it's not. It's very anti-military, you've got to take the political, the things going on during that time period. So it's very volatile, but it's definitely not a pro-military sort of song.
No, it's not. It's, I think, aimed at a element of who was not being drafted and who was. and a very strong statement against the ones that were not.
Right.
So, yeah. But it was pervasive in movies about Vietnam, which there are no movies about Vietnam that don't have a plethora of helicopters. So I think that's how the two got tied together.
Right.
Inadvertently. So,
Right.
all right. I did post something in here about our fly-in. If you want to learn more about it, check out the link on the website. And thank you to PayPal supporter Golf Mike for volunteering his taco truck, which will drive all the way from the Triad. It's a several-day trip to make it out to... We need to come up with a name for that airport. Tango Tango Alpha Airport, we haven't named. Duke Southern Executive.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you haven't heard us talk about it, it's on October 23rd. That's a Saturday. I hope the weather holds up. There are instrument approaches to that airport. There will be plenty of parking for those of you that want to drive. And if you want to fly in, we will have plenty of parking. We're being hosted by the Wings of Carolina Flying Club, and it will be at their hangar on the south side of the airport. Hope to see you there.
Cool. In further announcements, patrons Whiskey Tango Hotel and Echo Mike passed their private pilot check ride last week. And Sierra Romeo Mike from the Queen City Bravo just earned his CFI rating. Very nice. To the three of you, congrats.
Congrats, everyone. That's awesome. Thank you for sending those in. I'll try to keep putting those on there. I got one of those late last night. I think I put that in there. So cool. Share your stories. Thank you.
Yeah.
Timely feedback. All right. Some of these there's three of them. They're a little bit longer, but I think they're very good for timely feedback. Which one do you want?
I will start.
Okay.
With number one from, Sierra. In episode 193, someone asked about the roundabout route taken by some airliners from Florida or South Texas to L.A. You mentioned the max 100 mile from the shoreline without rafts. There was a 162-mile exemption on some airways in the Gulf of Mexico. Don't know if it is still in effect. This route has radar and VHF radio coverage above 20,000 feet. Also high terrain, sometime limited lower performance jets and all turboprops because of single engine drift, down, and diversion considerations. And in sparsely populated areas, it is sometimes difficult to stay within the required 60 minutes of a suitable airport at all times, as required by regulations. I believe that the main reason for the roundabout routing is ATC overflight fees charged by most countries for aircraft flying through but not landing or departing from the country they are overflying. During my last 3 years before mandatory retirement, I flew once or twice a month between Houston and Sydney nonstop. A straight line minimum distance route would pass slightly south of San Antonio, about 70 miles from the southern tip of Baja California near La Paz, and a point near 5 degrees south, 157 degrees west. This point happens to be the northwestern corner of the Tahiti Oceanic what is the flight?
I can't remember.
Something. Anyway, it's a boundary. I was told by a dispatcher that they charged the airline $2,500 every time we entered the airspace, whether for 1 minute or for more than 5 hours. As a result, the flight planning computer would optimize for wind to achieve minimum time, fuel, cost, sometimes several 100 miles to the north of the minimum distance track, but during the seasons when the wind favored going south, the route was pinned to that fix unless the savings exceeded $2,500. Gosh, what a pain.
Jeez.
This only happened about 10% of the time because the northwest corner of the Tahiti Fur was only halfway to Sydney. Sometimes we had rather noticeable left turn at that point to go for better winds for the remainder of the flight. There is also a strange area off the coast of Mexico for about 500 miles in the Mazatlan Oceanic FIR, where there is no radar, no radio contact, VHF or HF or satellite, no CPDLC, no nothing. Don't know if they even had telephones. Wow. We always called this area make-believe ATC. Don't make me laugh. By agreement between the airlines, we made in the blind radio calls from time to time with position and altitude, but the area is so vast, only the altitude reports were somewhat useful. I think this is what Class F airspace is, controlled with no communication. Fortunately, we do not have any of this in the U.S. Yeah, that sounds like the early airline world described in Fate as the Hunter, where they're just, making calls in the blind. Yes, altitude is much more important. I don't really care where you are as long as you're not at my altitude.
Yeah, we're going to do our own non-radar separation here.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like a controller. Yeah, what altitude are you at? 5? Okay. I don't really care where you are. You're not getting anyone.
We're going to 6. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Thank you for sending that in, Mr. Sierra. Thank you. Or Mrs. Number 2 from Juliet Kilo. All right, last week we read the question about 200 knots below Bravo airspace. Juliet Kilo says, thanks for the reply. As a follow-up, yes, I am aware of the Part 91 rules and the associated various speeds restrictions, which prompted my question. The question was really geared to a narrow condition of being on a SID as described on the Techie 3 out of a Western airport. I can understand how holding IFR SID traffic to this speed restriction would help reduce workload to the departure controllers by limiting the speed differences. To answer your question on the Techie 3, the departure to the north is under an edge of Sourdough Bravo's shelf. On the plate, there is a max 230 knots until just about a mile or two along the departure heading, which, by the way, you're still under the shelf, before starting a right turn to the south, but no other note about any speed restrictions. This is the part that I can't believe. When flying this departure, the pilot monitoring, which is the pilot that's on the radios, whoever's not flying, monitors the Class B reference plate and lets the pilot flying know when we are clear of the Bravo and can accelerate to 250 knots. As an aside, while flying tactical aircraft in the Navy, for some reason, operational necessities seem to require at least 300 knots below 10,000. Funny how that would happen. All right, I want to go back to some of this. We call the Eskimo on the tail Chester, by the way. Again, thanks for the great show, Juliet Kilo. Cool. Thank you for giving him a name.
Nice.
It's not Abe Lincoln. It's Chester.
Well, everyone knows that Abe's wife, that was his nickname. That was her nickname for him.
Chester?
Yeah.
Oh, everybody except for me, so I look like the dummy right now.
I just made that up, actually.
Oh. Oh, well played. Well
it seemed
played.
believable.
It did. You had me. Okay, so I looked at this plate this morning, and I'm sorry for implying that you didn't know the 200 knot rule. You obviously did. You just had planes that couldn't possibly fly that slow in the Navy.
Yeah, right.
The shelves of that Class Bravo, on that departure, it would be based on the altitude restriction further down. It's impossible for you to be in Bravo on that portion of the plate. So I'm not really sure why they even said 230. You would be limited to 200 being underneath the shelves. And if you guys are monitoring that, there's a lot going on a departure. So good on you guys for having that as part of your procedure to keep that up on something. We didn't even have anything that could display that. We didn't carry anything that showed. I don't think we did. I suppose if we pulled out a paper map, it would have been on there, but
yeah, a paper map, and then you would have had to have a DME. At what
right.
DME do we pop out of the shelf? Because
right.
our plane is the same way. There's no airspace depicted on there.
Mm-hmm.
Because the idea is that it doesn't really matter to you that much now for speeds, but it's pretty rare for us if we're within the distance of Class B airspace that we'd be going to over 200 knots anyway. So
Right. The other thing that's worth noting is that specific fix with the speed restriction on it was right after the departure where you're aimed towards two other big gigantic airports in the Bay Area, and they're turning you back to the southeast. So it's the point you get to at like 900 feet or so, give or take, and then you're taking a sharp right turn. So I think that arc of that turn at 230 or less is the point. So it doesn't take you forever to make that turn.
Oh, right.
Laterally.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
The faster you're going, the more ground you're taking up. So anyway, that's an interesting one. I wish it would have said 200 knots, then it would have totally made sense. At or below 200 knots, when you make this turn, you're underneath Bravo. You know that because you guys are monitoring it. And don't go too fast because it'll take forever for you to turn.
And undoubtedly, the controller will say, "Are you going 220 knots? How dare you?"
Yeah, what are you thinking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool. Now we know what to call the Eskimo on the back of your planes. Very cool. Thank you, Juliet Kilo. All right, you want to get the last one?
I forgot it was my turn. From SGAC patron Sierra Echo. Hello there. I listened today to the challengers expressed by one listener attempting to understand the airspace patterns near his point of departure in airspace complicated by large numbers of closely spaced airports, hoping to avoid circuitous routes. Your recommendation to call the TRACON was a good one. There is another pro tip approach that I have found useful. Within FlightAware, instead of searching for a specific airplane, search for your airport identifier of interest. The FlightAware map will position on your selected airport and will highlight all aircraft that are either departing or arriving at that airport in real time and the routes that they have all flown. You can quickly make out the different patterns and routes that are being used. If you watch it at different times of day or under different weather conditions, you can learn a lot about how traffic is being routed to from your airport, and you can discover other routes. This method is even more helpful when there are rapidly changing weather conditions. For example, I was planning a departure from an airport with several lines of thunderstorms moving through. By checking out FlightAware, I could quickly figure out which SIDs and gates were closed, which way everyone else was going, and where aircraft were getting through the storms. This is even better while in the air if you have internet access to see how aircraft are navigating active storms while en route. I have included a picture from the Dolphin Bravo from a few minutes ago. You can immediately see the arrival pattern that is being used to circumvent storms, the aircraft in blue, and the departure paths, the aircraft in green. Regards, patron Sierra Echo. Okay.
Just scroll down there on the next page. Yeah.
Yeah, I see that. Okay. Yeah, that is a great technique. You just kind of have to, stalk the airport a little bit, be an online stalker, and figure out what everyone is doing. I like it, though. It's very interesting. For airports that are busy enough to have some sort of, repeatable pattern,
Right.
I think this would be great, as long as, you're getting enough planes that are similar. They're going to have similar altitudes and routings, as yours. I think that's a great way to do it. Cool.
But even if you were flying a below 12,000 foot aircraft and you were looking at arrivals and departures for jets that are typically way above or, leaving that altitude, you can still get an idea of how air traffic is moving in that.
True.
In relation
you're still going to get
storms.
lateral. Yeah, some kind of lateral guidance. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So the picture he sent is the southern portion of Florida, and you can get a very big picture of how that weather's impacting some flights. It looks like one of the departures in the green facing southwest bound said, no, I'm going to fly right through this. And they're aimed at what appears to be a very bad spot on the radar.
I'm sure they're about to turn.
Sure. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Or they've already broken a wing off and they're returning. They're divert back to the airport.
Yes.
Anyway, cool. That's good. That is a pro tip. And I think that is a good thing for everybody to kind of take a look at. You can get a big picture from the internet. Just, you don't even need any fancy software. It's just FlightAware and it shows the arrivals and departures. So,
Yep.
Very cool. Shall we move on?
Let's move on.
All right, today's show topic is brought to us by patron Juliet Echo Charlie. He sends in amazing audio. We'll go ahead and play that, and we'll discuss his questions.
Hey, AGNRH, this is patron Juliet Echo Charlie with a question about medevac flights. I don't even remember ever really talking about them very much. I wondered if on a medevac flight, if you are required to do certain things, whether you just do things sort of within your discretion in order to try to get that plane or perhaps helicopter as direct a route as possible. Could you, for example, stop departures if you really wanted to get that plane in? Suppose it just shows up on your scope. What are you required to do and what is within your discretion to do? Might it be just extend other people's downwinds to maybe sequence them in sooner? Or could you even just kind of like shut everything down and have them come direct to the airport? And do you even know what is on a medevac flight when it's landing? Do you have any kind of advance notice? I presume it's, probably a combination of things like an air ambulance might be a medevac flight and or organ donations that are being, that are very time sensitive, but I really don't know exactly what qualifies for a medevac flight and what kind of notice you might get. And then separate from that, if a regularly scheduled commercial flight were to have a medical emergency, does that become a medevac flight? And let's say they're diverting into your airspace. Do you treat them the same way as a medevac flight, or is a medical emergency handled differently from a medevac flight? And what can you and can you not do for a declared medical emergency as opposed to medevac flight? Thanks for any insight into this set of questions. Bye.
Thank you, Juliet Echo Charlie. This is a good question. There's a lot of distinction between the two that you mentioned, and we'll try to hit on those today. Captain Nick, put on your headphones or click forward 30 seconds. I'm going to read a blurb from the 7110 about medevac. Do you approve of this, AG?
Yeah, sure. Yes.
All right. The 7110 in reference to medevac says provide priority handling to civilian air ambulance flights, which they'll have a special call sign medevac in front of them. Use of the medevac call sign indicates that operational priority is requested. Now, this is the part that's important. When verbally requested, provide priority handling to air evac, hospital, and scheduled air carrier, air taxi flights. Assist the pilots of medevac, air evac, and hospital aircraft to avoid areas of significant weather and turbulent conditions. When requested by a pilot, provide notifications to expedite ground handling of patients, vital organs, or urgently needed medical materials. Good judgment must be used in each situation to facilitate the most expeditious movement out of a medevac aircraft. All right, that's it for my blurb from the book.
All right.
Where should we begin on this? We don't get a lot of these in our airspace, but in fairness, we're the lowly transient portion of flights where they may be going to Duke or Metroplex.
Right. I think
ahead.
so many of our air ambulance and medevac flights in our airspace go basically unannounced and unnoticed by us. We might see the tag of the helicopter flying through, but unless they need to go straight through the airport or, they need something from us, we don't usually hear from them. We don't know if they're on an active flight, an active mission. We don't know really a whole lot other than that we see them and they're going to the hospital over at Cigarette.
Mm-hmm.
That is most of this medevac stuff that we work.
Yeah, and like you said, if they do call us, it's typically because they need to get up above a certain altitude. They may need a local IFR to get to where they're going. Sometimes they shoot an approach that they break off, cancel, and kind of break to the left near a hospital that's along the approach path. But like AG said, largely unnoticed because we have a letter of agreement with that local provider of air care helicopters. They have their own company codes. We can see them. If they want radar services, they can call us. We can just say ident because we can see their call sign. We know who they are. But that's a local agreement. And I imagine in any metropolitan area in the United States, there's some sort of LOA set up. Because if they had to call you for everyone, I mean, they're pretty much flying all day, but pretty low. Below 1,000 feet, 1,500 feet AGL most of the time.
Right.
And away from the Charlies and Deltas. So the other thing I do want to talk about is the cut-throughs that we do get occasionally. King Airs are common aircraft for this type of mission. We do have jets that are cutting southwest to go to Metroplex or to Duke. And it doesn't really say this in the book, but it kind of goes without saying. You just ignore the LOA. Follow the 7110 with altitude. Keep them high as long as you can. Higher is faster most of the time. And give them direct. When they get into our airspace, we're not playing a lot of games with... I'm just going to put them in handoff status. Point them out to the appropriate sector of the center that I'm going to cut there through their airspace. But typically, I'm immediately trying to make the amendment in the system to give them an altitude to flash where they need to go, Metroplex or Duke below 12, and put them in a flash. And maybe I'm not doing this correctly, but I stopped asking. It's medevac. They're going, you've taken a handoff. You've approved it.
Oh, yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah. If I was up there watching someone, especially like on the mid, calling, bothering the next sector for something that's completely obvious. Like it says on the flight plan, this guy, where he's going to Metroplex. I've got him in there at 10. He's direct. He's flashing at you. Like this is...
He's not in the arrival gate area, which would normally be worked, not even by us if it were jet, it would be center. And we've skipped that step. Come on, take the handoff. Here it comes. Right. And you have control for him. Now, if I do see a bunch of targets out there, because their pushes are late at Metroplex, their pushes. If we have an arrival that's going through their departure gate, I may say something like, hey, what altitude do you want? 12 or 10. But they're coming. I mean,
yeah. Do you want to be the guy that said, no, turn that medevac, out, put him on the arrival?
Right. No. And typically that's not during a time of day where that is going to cause a major inconvenience with arrivals. It's just, kind of flying in the face of their departures, but they can work that out with altitudes. If there was no hole for them, that would have been, we wouldn't even have seen it. They would have been worked into an arrival spacing with center. Right. I would imagine. But same for the east side of our airspace to Duke. We just fling them and they have no problem. Usually they'll ask for control. If they're landing on 5s over there, they'll ask for control and start them down. But we've done our job by keeping them as high as we can for as long as we can. And I think the only thing I will say on the landline then is wrong altitude for direction, because I get them below a center shelf at 10, but they're eastbound, which is wrong altitude for direction. And I will put that out there.
Right. I had a medevac departing from Cigarette on the mid, one of the few mids that I worked. Mm-hmm. And it was, very early in the morning, 1, 2 in the morning. And I sent him direct to a Newark satellite. Uh-huh. No. That was not appreciated by the center controller. That was definitely not okay. Really? He called and said, is that guy direct? Because I amended it to direct. I said, yes. He goes, no, my control. Okay.
All right, but the difference may be they may not have any automation when you go into weird spots, and it's probably not taking the pilot that much further out. We're talking 5 or 6 degrees maybe to get you to a point that they can feed to the next center. I get that, but he's not going to make him fly to Cleveland first before he turns eastbound.
Right.
I'm sure it's something reasonable, but yeah. Now, all he had to do though was the same thing we'd be doing, is manually just flinging them and not following any letters. What's the worst that could have happened? The other sector would have been like, this guy's really going direct, and they probably would have made it work.
I know. Anyway,
Center controllers.
yeah, we won't get it.
Jeez, guys. We're talking about teamwork here, and you guys like, no.
It's 2 a.m. Come on, there's nobody out here.
Right. There are literally no targets on our scope.
Nothing is happening.
I could see 200 miles away. There's nothing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about medical emergencies.
Okay.
These are different.
Yes. Right. This wasn't the intention of the flight when it took off.
No. Typically, they're a divert if they're coming here. We could see an arrival that was planned to go to Triad that has turned into a medical emergency. But go ahead. I'll kind of push the story along. Center typically calls and tells us this is a medical emergency. They've already amended it, so it looks like they were planning on landing at Triad. It's a call sign we've never seen before, and you're the controller. What do you do?
I'm talking to Center.
They just called you to coordinate, and now he's flashing at you. He's super high. What do you do to get him down?
Well, it depends. I mean, if he needs a vector to get down, but I'll probably just tell the center controller whatever, as low as I can give him. Let's say I have traffic that I think might be a factor at 5 or something. I might just say, put him direct, start him down to 6 if I think he can make it. That descent, it's sort of it's going to be altitude dependent on where he is. Otherwise, I'll say, put him on this heading for his descent, start him down to 3. I mean, try to give away as much as I can and just expedite. But I mean, there's going to be times where he can't, like going straight to the runway is not going to work.
Right. Because
they didn't say, hey, let's have a medical emergency so that our descent profile is perfect into Triad.
Right.
That's not going to happen. So a lot of the times these guys that come screaming out of the flight levels, they don't want to go to Metroplex. It's too busy. That's too much delay. They don't want to go to Duke. It's too far. Whatever it is, they want to come here, and they're willing to take some turns to get down to do it. So, yeah, I tell the center, just depending on what he's at, what I can give away and direct if that works out too. So,
all right. So while that was happening, somebody would say something loud enough where someone in charge would hear it, so they can start coordinating with the tower and get emergency personnel rolling. Typically, that may have already been done. The coordination that the center had already done was a phone call, and the supervisor already picked it up, and now they're finally here. But, I mean, that could unfold pretty quickly depending on where they're coming from and their route. And like AG said, they may be super high in the 20s, 30s, where they're basically just 90 degrees off course, aimed at the first airport that's big enough for them that they know they can get emergency services. And here we come. What can we do? So there's a lot of coordination way above our airspace that happens to get them in that spot. But, I would do the same thing you did, get them as low as possible and start vectoring them when I needed to. Now, I'll give you a scenario. That guy's coming from Henby, and you have traffic on 2-3 left already, and maybe a sequence of 4 or 5 airplanes. What are you going to do to get him in maybe quicker?
Well, he'll go, if it's visuals, I'm going to tell him, to go direct to the final approach fix, typically where they're going to want to be set up 5 miles. And then, so he's delayed the least amount that he possibly can be. And then I'll move the other traffic out of the way. You don't want, typically we try not to run a bunch of arrivals right before an emergency, because then if in the off chance that one of those guys, something happens, they blow a tire, whatever, now I'm sending my emergency guy around. Like,
you don't want that.
That's not ideal. So kind of we're already starting to try to clear the runway a little bit. Send guys to the other runway if it's open, and move your other arrivals and people out of the way. I can't imagine anybody that's out there flying that would be upset by getting made from number 1 to number 5,
right,
because of a medical emergency.
Right. And it could be something like a heart attack, or, somebody's unconscious. We don't know. Sometimes we don't get all those details. It really doesn't matter. I mean, time is the only thing that you and I can affect. Get them on the ground as quickly and safely as possible. So I agree with you. And it's obviously at that point, there's some communication that other pilots are hearing it. Hey, we're moving airplanes to this runway. Change to runway 23 right. Put them on the localizer. Get them on the way low so you can get the guy from the north in. Go ahead.
I mean, the patient thing brings up a good point. Sometimes that information about the patient, because our first responders on the airport want to know what they're dealing with. What do they need to expect? What equipment do they need to bring? Specifically, is there anything that they need to know? And sometimes that information gets coordinated through a different avenue. I don't know if it's the airline calling, emergency personnel, if they're getting a hold of those people directly. But sometimes it does go through us. We are relaying that, that information, the age, the sex, the condition, as much information as they can figure out about the patient. And we're relaying that to, it's typically the airfield, fire and rescue guys that are there first. But sometimes we know about these far enough in advance that there can be ambulances, there waiting. They could, even as far out as they've gone through the terminal, they're out at the gate, ready to receive this person by the time the plane gets there. So,
yeah. So assume we can get them down and, make them number one. Sometimes we run into the pilots aren't quite ready. They came from the flight levels. There's a billion things to do to get an airplane configured and slowed down. And, they still have to go through their normal briefing. If we're on visuals, great, but there's still things they have to do to set up. And they may have never been to this airport before. So this is really where the professional pilot comes out. Their job becomes difficult. It's a lot of chaos for a few minutes, but, most of the time they're ready. They can take the visual approach clearance or the approach clearance that we're issuing for the instrument landing. When they get to an appropriate altitude, they're able to get all that stuff done because they're in a hurry too. But sometimes we do get them saying, all right, we just need a couple more minutes here. Okay. You're also still at 10,000 feet, 12 miles from the airport. I get it. Turn left heading.
Right. And we're also still responsible for the other 60, to 150 people that are on this airplane. We can't endanger the lives of everyone else. So that has to be reasonable. You can't we're not going to make this crazy emergency descent, with our hair on fire.
Right. This is a good example of when we can use the crash phone. We get everybody involved. We can get gate information out so that the emergency personnel go to the right place. The ground controller and local coordinate, make sure that there's no reason this airplane has to stop, turn off the runway, take a beeline to wherever they need to go. Oftentimes the crew doesn't have a clue what gate they're going to. We're the ones telling them that. So while we're working them in radar, somebody in the tower is coordinating with airport to make sure they go to the right place. And, the last thing you want is them to get on the ground quickly, safely, and then be stuck because they can't get to a gate. At our airport, there will be no excuse for that other than poor communication. There's always somewhere to go.
Right.
So, did we cover that?
I think so.
Yeah. I just had one recently.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. It was low drama. There was no traffic and nothing in their way, and everything worked out fine.
Right. Good.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you, Juliet Echo Charlie. Good question. Thanks for the great audio. Keep sending them in. Anything else to add?
Nope.
All right. I'm going to remember to turn this button down so I don't blow everybody's ears out here. Feedback time.
Feedback.
All right, I'll get this one.
All right.
You got two of the longer ones from above. I'll be nice and take this one.
Thank you.
All right, from the Terp Self. Hello, from the Terp Self. I had a somewhat adrenaline-inducing situation today that I wanted your feedback on. I actually did get air traffic control's number, and I talked to the supervisor, but it didn't seem like she had been on position at the time. I attached a markup screen capture that may help visualize what happened. AG, I put that up. It's down at the bottom. I was flying as a contract pilot for the airplane owner, and he was on board. I was at 7,000 feet, heading about 50 heading, talking to a center. I had been vectored off course about 20 degrees from military airspace, but was now clear of that and had just been cleared direct to my destination. Shortly after turning back on course, ATC said November 123, turn left heading 270 immediately for traffic. I had been paying attention to the ADSB traffic and hadn't seen anyone close, but I immediately disengaged the autopilot and swung the airplane around. So he was on a 50 heading, 270, it's 120 degrees.
It looked like he didn't even get all the way through the turn.
140 degrees, yeah. Correct. Notice this turn is almost back the way that I came, about 140 degrees of turn. As I was turning, the controller stated, November 123, make that heading 300 and climb to 8,000 immediately. I shoved the throttle up and pulled back on the yoke. You can believe the adrenaline was flowing at this point. Did a plane just pop up on the scope, headed right at me? The controller used the word immediately twice, and there was definitely a tone of urgency in his voice. Once I got back to 8,000, which didn't take long, the controller cleared me back on course to my destination. I'm growing more upset by reading this.
Oh, my word.
I confirmed and added, I never did see the traffic. His response was, he's 5 miles ahead of you, headed in the same direction. You were overtaking, so I had to turn you to stay more than 5 miles away. All right.
Okay.
Needless to say, I was pretty stunned for a moment and then responded something like, you used the word immediately twice. We thought we were in danger of hitting someone. After another few minutes, I asked for their number to call them and discuss. When I did, a little over an hour later, I talked to the supervisor on duty. She was receptive to my concerns, but didn't seem to have been online at the time. I gave her pertinent information, and she said she'd look into it in case some retraining needed to happen. But as I mentioned to her, I can't help but think that the controller gave me an adrenaline-inducing about-face turn and climb to avoid getting a deal from a situation that he created. The other airplane was on a very similar heading to me. I did have about 50 knots of overtake. Both of us had been traveling that direction for many miles, so this should not have been a surprise to the controller, and a simple climb or descent or small turn for traffic would have been sufficient if given several miles earlier. But instead, we got an immediate turn and a climb. Use of this word carries with it a certain implication of imminent danger, which I just can't see as the case with the other airplane still over 5 miles away. All right. I wish this frequency was on live ATC so I get the exact wording, but it's not. However, this is pretty close to how I heard things. I don't think I really have a question exactly. Just wondering your thoughts on this situation. When do you generally break out the word immediately? Would this situation fit that definition, or did I just overreact? Thanks, guys. Romeo Whiskey, the Terp Self. All right. The picture is exactly what he said. He turned hard left over 90 degrees and then got an immediate climb and put back on course. And you could see the target that's nowhere near them, going away from them this whole time, by the way. I'm biting my tongue, but I'm going to share some opinion on this because we do our best not to disparage anybody based on the information you've given us and the picture and your description. It sounds to me like it was highly inappropriate use of the word immediately. And I agree with you that there should have been something done well before this to avoid anything drastic, like a 90-degree turn and a climb, to avoid a deal. Now, you use the word deal. We don't talk about that all the time. You're talking about an operational error where there's a separation loss. A center controller doesn't quite have the benefit of using 3 miles like we do. It doesn't seem like it would have mattered 3 or 5. They were freaking out. And I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. There could have been a couple things going on in the background where they didn't see this, and they are scoped out pretty high, and maybe they think 5 miles and center land is close. That's pretty far away, but they should have done something way ahead of time to avoid this. It was obvious on the development of the traffic that this was going to happen. So I personally don't use the word immediately unless targets are about to merge. And
that's what it says that word is for.
right, you are in imminent danger. You're going to hit something, or I think you're going to hit something. And 99 out of 100 times, the second airplane is not one that I'm talking to, or I would have done something to preclude the immediate. Prior to this, I would have used altitude to separate two VFRs, for example, or one VFR from an IFR. I would have given traffic calls so everybody knows, hey, I see the guy that you're about to say is this traffic for me. He's stuck 500 feet below you. You're staying there. Everybody's fine. That is a traffic call that I will give, because it is alarming for a pilot to see that, and they wonder, do they see this person? We're talking VFR to IFR, 500 feet. That's pretty close. Legal, but I will give them a heads up. If I'm the one who created the problem, or I see it developing, I need to do something with turns way before this becomes a targets merging situation.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, I would assume. I would assume that. Look, I'm not going to get into the center stuff. Okay, we give them a hard time. It's all in good fun. I'm going to assume this is a center with 5 miles.
Yes.
I guess it could have been a Tracon that
he said he was talking to a center. It was a center.
Oh, it was a center. Okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't. I don't understand the rules for divergence. Somebody from Centerland, please tell me. I know that sometimes they can use it, and sometimes they can't. They can't use it at all. You're telling me?
I think they have to be within 40 miles of the antenna, and the antenna they're using for these two targets would have to be. They have to be within 40 miles of it. I think I may have that wrong, but if I feel like that opportunity does not present itself nearly as much as it's obviously for us, but they don't have that opportunity a lot of the time. So let's just assume that most of the time they have to use 5.
Okay. It has been my experience giving planes to the center, let's say at the same altitude, that are going to cross, like to me, they're not a factor. They're going to leave my boundary 30 miles apart, but they're going to cross somewhere way out in center's airspace 50 miles from now at, the same altitude. They're going to be very close, less than 5 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
And the center will say, hey, you got to do something with one of those guys. Like, dude, you do something.
You do it.
But my point in saying that is they have tools that say, hey, you got a conflict. Like, it's not something they have to search for. For our tools, we actually have to recognize it and go, oh, these two guys at 8 could be a problem. And then I have to use the tool to find out what the minimum is going to be.
I'm pointing to the tool.
And then I can make a decision like, hey, you turn 5 degrees right and you turn 5 degrees left. And then you're not going to hit. You're not going to be anywhere close. And then once you pass, you go back on course. Or somebody can climb or descend.
Right.
Usually the faster guy, I'll give them the option. Hey, you're overtaking traffic. You want to go up or down?
Mm-hmm.
And then they go, you can pass the traffic and then you can go back to your altitude. Yes, my guess is this is something that was noticed for whatever reason way too late. It was a panic vector.
Panic is right. It was a panic.
It's like you're driving your car and you're getting a little drowsy and you start to doze off and the car goes off the road and you wake up to the car like halfway off the road, bouncing around. And instead of just calmly maybe apply the brakes and start to ease the car back into the lane, you just full left turn, overcorrect and roll the car across the interstate. I mean, it's just a panic vector.
I'll take this one step further, and I may be going up too far with this, but I'm going to anyway.
All right.
Let's just handle this the other way. You realize you are about to have an operational error. You can't use divergence. You need 1,000 feet or 5 miles, one or the other, hard, or you're going to have an operational error and you're going to have somebody tap your shoulder and say, hey, you had an operational error. We need to talk about it. And I cannot imagine any scenario where the person giving this discussion, I'll call it that, would say, why didn't you issue an immediate turn? Why didn't you issue an immediate climb?
All right.
Had you said You know it's about to happen. You're the controller. There's nothing you can do about it. It's going to happen. He's 30 knots overtake, 40 knots, whatever. November 1, 2, 3. Traffic, 12 o'clock, 5.1 miles. Same altitude. Turn left heading to whatever you need to establish separation. But you've given him the information. He's not about to hit somebody. All right, I can do that. And just maybe I'll save this deal from happening.
Right.
Maybe, maybe not. Okay, so fine. They break 5 miles. You didn't have any sort of a standard separation. At least you did something, and you didn't create another unsafe situation. Well, I shouldn't say another, an actual unsafe situation. 5 miles apart with a very little overtake in speed is not something you need to do an imminent turn or a climb for. So you acknowledge it, and like you said, calmly apply steering control to get you back in the lane instead of slamming on the brakes, ripping your wheel to the right, side swiping they want it in the lane already, and maybe going off into a ditch.
Right.
You are correct. You did not overreact. I hope you got to relay your opinion of what happened and how the use of the word immediate puts you into a unusual situation in the airplane, and you were panicked that you were going to hit something. I hope you got that point across so that the supervisor can relay that to the controller. But thank you for sending that in. I'm sorry if I went too far with my opinion, but this was a bad situation.
Yeah, it is, it is what it is, I guess. I've done similar. I mean, I've had similar things where I realize at the last minute that I'm about to have a deal. Everyone's done that. I don't think that I panicked. That's why it's 3 miles, or that's why it's 5 miles, right?
Right.
It's already happened, or maybe it hasn't, but it's to the point where you forgot about it too long already.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, like you said, maybe you can, maybe you can't salvage it. And if you can't, they're still 4.9 miles apart. Like there's no panic here.
Right. And I would much rather have that conversation as a controller. Hey, you know what? I didn't realize it. I didn't think it was going to be an issue. I look back and it's an issue. I turned them. Oh, well, I did my best to keep separation, but I'm certainly not going to ask this guy to go into a Blue Angels climb, to get away from traffic that is nowhere near him.
Right. And you're freaking the pilot out too. I mean, geez.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, we're beating this horse.
We should move on.
All right, you get number 2.
Number 2 from Charlie Foxtrot. AGNRH, Charlie Foxtrot, hailing from the airport in Colorado that only happens once a century, where Cirrus, oh boy. All right. Where Cirrus eat key lime pie off of the parallel runway for breakfast. I think I can say that because everyone walked away.
You just did say it.
He did say it, and then I said it, but I'm only saying what he said.
Right.
I'm not endorsing it in any way. Excuse me. I want to really thank you for the show and everything it does to help me feel more comfortable on the radio and the air and to laugh and learn while I'm driving to the airport. I had a question about standard phraseology that was a little confusing to me on a recent flight. A few minutes after a VFR takeoff from a class trolley with an assigned squawk, I was directed to change over to departure. I checked in with departure, November 123, climbing through 7800. Departure came back with November 123, radar contact, fly heading 350, at or below 8500.
At or above.
At or above. 8,500. The frequency was extremely busy, and by the time I was really debating what to do, I was only 30 seconds away from 8,500, and my present heading was 335, so I didn't call them back for clarity. But my question is, should I have made the turn immediately and continue to climb to 8,500 or above, or should I have waited until I reached 8,500 before making the turn? Or is this just a case of something that could go either way that I should have clarified in the moment. Okay, let me read this again. So he's climbing through 78, and they say radar contact, fly heading 350 at or above 8,500. Okay, I see where the confusion could be.
Yeah.
That is terrible phraseology.
Ding, 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 ding.
When I first read this the first time, I would say yes. Fly the 350 right then and just maintain VFR at or above 8,500. That's what I think the intent of this was, but I can see easily how that would be construed to mean wait until you're above 8,500 to turn. But the phraseology for that would be reaching 8,500, fly heading 350. The way that I probably would say this is you radar contact, fly heading 350, maintain VFR at or above 8,500.
Bingo.
That's typically how we would say it at Triad. But since you're so close from being there anyway, it wasn't, especially where there was some confusion on what does this mean. I think you were fine if you waited until 8,500 to start the turn. Not
Right.
to mention the fact that your heading and the assigned heading are so close that, unless you're really paying attention, it's fairly indistinguishable. I don't know what kind of plane you were in, but if you're in a slower plane, the amount of time it takes to register this turn, the controller's probably not even going to notice.
Yeah. So I think you did the right thing by waiting. If it's super busy and some situational awareness of the traffic around you, we're talking 15 degrees. It's not going to be the difference between the controller noticing or not. So I agree with you. It was poor phraseology. That's why it created confusion. And waiting until 8,500 to fly it just so you're sure about it probably was fine.
Right. But even then, flighting 350 at or above 85. So that makes it sound like, well, at 9, I could fly my heading.
Right.
It's so ambiguous. Yeah. Oh, I would tear up a trainee for saying something like that. What?
Right. You've
What
created
are
a
you
bunch of
saying?
ambiguity on the frequency. And you're busy, so when the pilot wants to call back and clarify something, there's no opportunity for them to do that. So,
and if they do, now it's tying up the frequency even more. Like, you have created this as the controller. You did this to yourself. That's why there's standard phraseology. This is when it matters. Yeah, when there's 2 airplanes, I can get away with, chit-chatting with the pilots.
mm-hmm.
Or saying something non-standard. But part of it is knowing when you can do that and when you can't, or when you shouldn't, because it just creates this sort of situation. What?
Right.
I don't understand what that even means.
And the controller that's going down the tubes, calling back to clarify, they probably don't even realize they gave you just terrible phraseology. So now we have this awkward exchange of, why are they asking me? I already told them.
Yes, they think in their head that their instruction was perfectly clear.
Right.
That they conveyed their intent perfectly. Right? Yeah.
Right. And they did not.
No.
Good question. It's very good of you to be aware of that type of thing. A lot of pilots wouldn't even have noticed that was ambiguous. So good on you for asking. I think that shows a little bit of awareness about a couple little words and they were missing or in the wrong order. And you noticed that. So you're ahead of the game. And the more you talk to, AG and I experienced this weekend before we get to the last feedback, we talked to 1, 2, 3, 4 different facilities. With different approaches to traffic. I'll put it that way.
Right.
Different use of phraseology, which shouldn't be that different, but a lot of differences that, the more you fly in the NAS and hear other people, maybe that's normal the way they say it there, but the next facility, they would break it up very distinctly and use different or proper phraseology depending on how you want to look at it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't say anything mean.
Yeah. We have been a little hard on controllers this episode.
Well, a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's why we're also not identifying who they are. And the stories don't include them.
That's right.
So everybody's learning.
Yeah. Listen, I'll be the first person to try to say that I am not the best controller in the building. I never have claimed that to be that. And us, answering a question like this and saying that this is a controller's mistake is not us saying they suck and we're better. It's just trying to help clarify the situation
Right.
for the people that experienced it and for other people to learn from it. That's all it is.
Agreed.
Will just put me in the public square on a big thing and I will scream to the world, I suck. I'm a terrible
You do not suck.
controller.
You and I are both abundantly aware of our relative abilities compared to some other people. I am, and I know you are. We don't claim to be the best. We make mistakes too. So that's all this is, talking about it and trying to help you out. So
That's it.
All right, I'll get the last one from Patron Delta Zulu. Hello, gentlemen. Patron Delta Zulu here. I just have a quick tip I like to use when filing my when filing my circuitous non-GPS routes. Bonus points if you read circuitous correctly on the first try. I did. I had to pause. AG also got that word in one of your feedbacks correct.
Yes.
And I made a mental note of that.
Uh-huh.
I'll first file in ForeFlight using one of their recommended routes. Then at some point before departure, I'll get an alert from ForeFlight saying whether the route was accepted or if not, what I should expect. If it wasn't accepted, I'll amend it in ForeFlight to the route I was told to expect. Once that's done, I get one more alert telling me to expect the newly filed route. It works like a charm every time. The controller just has to read clear to XYZ as filed, and ForeFlight already has the route programmed in. Cheers, Delta Zulu. All right, I got to experience part of this weekend. I did file. I did the trick that we gave people. If you're IFR rated, don't do this if you're just a VFR pilot, please. I filed an IFR flight plan. When we called to get it, we asked them to change it to a VFR altitude, and we departed. All the information was in there with the routing we wanted to do. So we skipped the awkward step of telling them that we were going to navigate using some VORs to keep us clear of a MOA. But it worked both times. I did get those alerts from ForeFlight. There's a part of this that if anybody at ForeFlight is listening, I really want to know the answer to this. The way this works, when you filed that route, say it was one of the recommended routes from ForeFlight, which is spelled out pretty clear. We had 9 choices to go to this airport out east with you and I. I picked the one that I liked. I looked at it where it was in relation to airspace. That's the one I filed. I got an email saying it was accepted. One, I don't know who accepted it because it was the night before. 2,
Accepted.
if it weren't accepted or it's put back a different route, which Delta Zulu is telling us, hey, if it wasn't accepted, it will tell you which one to expect. You can amend your filed flight plan to the one to expect. Then when you show up at the airport and they have the ticket, it's the one that this magical elf at ForeFlight or in the background somewhere has told them to put in. That's the part I don't understand what's happening.
It's certainly not anyone at that facility.
Correct. There's nobody at Triad getting your flight plan days in advance and saying this won't work. We get it 30 minutes prior, and it may have gone through the steps suggested in this. You got some magical elf message. I'm calling them an elf. Either a computer or a human is telling you what to do in terms of filing. All we see on the Triad Tower portion of it is whether or not it works. Most of the time, our GI routes have to be amended to go anywhere near Metroplex or around it. So something's not working all the time, or maybe it's just that that's not being utilized this way at our airport. But I want to know what computer or group of people is seeing this filed flight plan and telling you whether or not it's a good route or a bad route.
The only thing I can think is that it would be the PDRs, the ones that are going to PDR. And
Okay.
the computer, as soon as it goes in, instantly knows, nope, you have to go on this PDR. Because those are only generated by the computer. Controllers don't generate that plus routing. And it knows that, hey, when this prints out at Triad Approach or at Triad Clearance Delivery, it is going to have this plus routing on it. Now, the problem is we get that plus routing sometimes for Metroplex, but it's incorrect. It doesn't adhere to the LOA, so then we have to change it anyway. But then some of them, like up at Racetrack North, I know we're going long here, they PDR, and we do have to use those. It's just, I don't know. That would be my guess. That would be my guess. If it's going to PDR, you're going to get that notification.
But that means that when I filed it, that it doesn't just get sat in some sort of hopper where it's filed a couple hours before. It's sitting. It goes to some sort of FAA database or computer.
Yeah.
Where it's analyzed for the route.
Well, it becomes a test strip, and then they dip it in the flight plan tank, and if it comes out with a PDR on it,
I guess my question is, how is ForeFlight getting information back from that system to signify to the pilot this route is good or bad, and if it's not good, this is what you should expect. File this one, and guess what? They're going to end up giving you as filed. That's the part the communication portion of it between the ForeFlight software and wherever your flight plan goes into the abyss.
Yeah.
A day before your flight. So.
Yeah, interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, but it's very cool. That whole system worked very well. I'm glad I got to do it this weekend. I did get the fancy messages. My route was accepted, so I didn't have to do the, hey, try this, but very cool. The tools available with that program, and we're not sponsored by them, by the way. The tools available in that program cannot be understated. It's an amazing program. I love it.
Yeah.
All right. We are done with feedback. We have no new question of the week. Check out atcsax.com to find a great way to keep your ATC headset free from dust and dirt. They have pilot bags too. You can get your initials on it in your airport. It's very sturdy. It's amazing. Check it out. That's at pilotsax.com if you want the pilot headset bag. We have feedback read up to just prior to August 23rd, right on the show, or responded via email. If we missed yours, let us know. AG, anything to add?
No.
Closing out episode 196 of Opposing Bases Air Traffic Talk. Romeo Hotel.
And Alpha Golf. Goodbye, everyone.
Visit OpposingBases.com where you can leave Romeo Hotel and Alpha Golf an audio or written message. Find them on Twitter and Instagram at Opposing Bases. Or send feedback directly to their inbox at feedback@OpposingBases.com. The views and opinions expressed on Opposing Bases Air Traffic Talk are for entertainment purposes only and do not represent the views, opinions, or official positions of the Federal Aviation Administration, Department of Transportation, or the National Air Traffic Controllers Association. All show recordings are done on personal time and personal property. Actual air traffic recordings are from third-party sources, and no government resources are used in the production of the show. There is no nexus between Opposing Bases and the FAA or NATCA. All episodes are the property of Opposing Bases and shall not be recorded or transcribed without express written consent. For official guidance on laws, rules, and regulations, refer to your local flight standards district office or a certified flight instructor. Opposing Bases offers this podcast to promote aviation safety and enhance the knowledge of its listeners, but makes no guarantees to listeners regarding accuracy or legal applications.